Hi, my name is Jonna and I play football for Chelsea FC and for the Swedish national team. And you are listening to the Blue Day podcast.
Fellow Chelsea supporters, here at the Blue Day podcast, we are pleased to welcome this individual on the show today. He made 27 appearances for the club and played with the likes of Kerry Dixon, Graham Lasso and Dennis Wise. Here is Damian Matthew. Damian, welcome to the Blue Day podcast. How are you?
Fantastic, Keith. Good to be on, and always nice when you're a former Chelsea player to be involved with St. Chelsea.
Well, Damien, this is the first interview of 2022, so it'll be nice to sort of pick your brains a little bit of Chelsea from years gone by. I know it's been a while since you last played for the club, but I want to start the interview by asking, did you have any particular influences in your life when it came to deciding to become a professional footballer?
We spoke briefly before, Keith, in terms of you're a young kid with that dream, and I was a kid that moved out of London when I was about 6 or 7 and ended up moving down to Kent. And the standard was good, but you realise as you got older that the standard was even better, closer to London. But I was that kid, I was that kid that went to school in a little place called Westmoreland, played for Larkfield, and you'd always be saying to people, I want to be a professional football player. And I've coached kids for many years, and sometimes people are quite dismissive with that type of ambition, but it was always my dream. And lucky enough, you played for your school, you played for your district, played for your county, so you went through that great journey that I feel young players in my time went through. And then obviously the clubs come calling, and later than they do now, and you actually just felt ready, if that made sense, because you really had, again, that ambition and drive to want to be a player. And I was very lucky. I had a choice of a few clubs, but I always use the example that once I walked off that Fulham Road and went through them blue gates as they was then, there seemed to be something a bit special that definitely hooked me. And I was, delighted to sign as a schoolboy.
And who were your idols growing up as a kid?
It was funny, because obviously, I followed Chelsea and that, you remember Clive Walker? That was probably the standout candidate. Once I went there, the likes of Pat Nevin were there, Kerry Dixon, as you mentioned, and that, and ironic because when I was a scholar, I ended up cleaning Kerry. So I cleaned Kerry's boots. So that was great for me at Christmas because he always looked after you and that, which was great. But so you sort of had. I always felt Chelsea had so many flair players. We wasn't the Chelsea that we are now, of course, with all the success that we've had over the years. But I always felt that we had really good players, flair players, and great characters and that. And as young kids, I just felt we were surrounded by good coaches who really helped us. And more importantly, as we just said earlier, like Dave Lee's coming on and Jason Cundy and Graham Stewart, Frank Sinclair, Eddie Newton were younger, Craig Burley. So you were surrounded by really, really good players yourself. And I feel that definitely helped me. But yeah, I never had real standout. If you said, like, I was more into, say, the French team then, of Platini and Tigana. So they were more exciting for me and that, and obviously England had great players in Glenn Hoddle and Robson, Paul Davis and that. So you had players that you admired. I didn't necessarily have these out-and-out idols as such. And
you mentioned before that you started your career at Chelsea, and again, when you just mentioned the walk at Fulham Road and sort of seeing the ground and seeing everything sort of in front of you, do you have any sort of standout memories of starting your career at Chelsea in the academy? Yeah,
it was funny, to be fair, because I used to. I came up a couple of times, and you go to school, travel up on the bus all the way from Kent, and it took forever and that, like to get, and we trained at Battersea Park and that, and that was Red Cinder then, and again, it was a beautiful, beautiful facility in terms of Battersea Park, but we used to train on this Red Cinder. And Gwyn Williams was our coach, and I just sort of said to Gwyn, I said, look, the travel is quite very long, and you've got that dedication and focus and also maturity, I'd say, to recognise that, you know what, this is going to be tough, but I'm loving Chelsea. I still want to be part of it. So I used to come up just in the half terms, and that was great for me because you had something to look forward to a great deal. So at 14, 15, I would come up more during the half terms. I remember I was staying with Dave Lee again, actually. So I was staying with Dave Lee in Diggs. We actually had Sean Dykes come down to on trial. He was a boy from sort of the Nottingham area. And I remember saying to him when I was about 14, 15, you're going to sign? Because I was adamant I was going to sign like Associated Schoolboys. And he said, yeah, I'll sign. And then the next I caught up with him, I'm playing for Burnley. He's playing for Chesterfield. And we're standing in the tunnel just about to play each other. And I remember saying to him, and I've been friends for a long time with Sean, that I thought you said you was going to sign. And he went, no, I was going to, but my mum and dad wanted me to stay closer to home. So again, it was more about the journey we had as young players, all the names I mentioned earlier. I'm sure all of them will speak fondly, not only when we made our debuts and playing for the great club, but also the journey to get us there was absolutely fantastic. And so good times.
And you signed professional terms in around about 1989. That must have been a special moment for you and your family, knowing that all the hard work and sacrifices that you did has paid off.
No, 100%, Kevin. And you, as I say, you're a kid with a dream. You sort of signed the Associated Schoolboy forms. It was then. You got your YTS. That was great. You finished your O levels. It was at school. I was lucky. I mean, I didn't play a great deal in the first year. You sort of Jason Cundy, Dave Lee. They was a year older than me, and and you played some games, and you were developing not slowly, but again, the opportunity for under 18s was more. So then the second year, I was really pleased because I was captain of the youth team, and you obviously played, and you felt then that once you were captain in the youth team, which is still an honour to this day, you feel you got a chance basically in that. So yeah, we had then Bobby Campbell came in, and you knew basically that he liked you as a player, which always gives you confidence. Gwyn, Eddie Neveski, as I mentioned, really good people and that that surrounded you and helped you in your development. So when you got the pro, you was absolutely delighted.
You've mentioned Bobby Campbell. He was the manager at the time when you signed the professional forms. What was he like as a coach to you?
He was brilliant, to be fair, Keith, for that. I mean, it was funny because, I got on really well with John Hollins as well because he was Kent-based. So I got on really well with John. Obviously, things didn't work out for him in whatever capacity. And Bobby came in and he was different to John in terms of just character, totally different. But he was a real football man. He obviously had a history with Liverpool, and he really was a great football man. And in terms of like the way he wanted to play, his character, just very strong, but I felt fair. He liked young players. He could see that young players had a passion and a hunger for the club. So you always felt that, well, if you gave your all and you showed that dedication plus your talent, that you would get a chance. So yeah, I mean, he was great for us, wasn't he? Because he gave me and Graham Stewart our debuts against Crystal Palace. I remember it really well, Easter Monday, and with Gary O'Reilly getting sent off, it made you straight away thought, well, this is a great debut. 11v10 playing at Stamford Bridge with the quality we had, we got a great chance, and we won that game 3-0. And then obviously, I think with the following season, the team was under a little bit of pressure, and Bobby stuck us in, didn't he, at Manchester United. So again, they're two games early in your career that you remember very, very strongly.
I'll talk about the Man United game later, but I want to sort of brush on the Crystal Palace win. It was 3-0. It was, as you said, it was your debut, and it was also Graham Stewart's debut. What was going through your mind on that occasion, and when did you know that you was going to be in the team?
We knew on the Saturday, but I think actually, I don't know. I think Chelsea might have let our parents know. Somehow they were there, basically, which is great. So I can't remember, because I definitely don't think we got told the day before, which sometimes happens now. Well, in all walks of football, but Yeah, you felt great. It's you obviously, like I said earlier, to captain the youth team, captain the reserves. It was very, very proud moments in terms of an individual to be involved in the team. You've all got them dreams, them aspirations, as I mentioned, and you look at the likes of Jason Cundy. I think made his debut after us, and but David Lear made his debut before us. Gareth Hall was another really good young pro who was really tough on us as kids, but a brilliant role model in terms of of how he'd try and help you get ready for the world we were going into. And so, yeah, delighted to get the chance. It's everything for a young player for me to make that debut and then ultimately have a career. But yeah, great memories. And as you say, it must be great memories because I remember it clearly, as you say, and the result very, very clearly.
We'll touch on the Man United game. We won 3-2 at Old Trafford in November of 1990. Do you have any particular stories of this game? Because at that time, when Chelsea would go up to Old Trafford, we didn't have a bad record there. We wouldn't sort of lose too many games there. With the squad that we had, again, it wasn't the team that was going to be competing in the league, but you had great characters in the side. Do you have any good stories of that particular team that beat Man United?
Definitely so. Yeah, definitely so. I mean, when you look at, I think the midfield was obviously Andy Townsend, myself, Dennis Wise, and I think Graham Lestow. Was it Graham or Graham Stewart? Was it Graham Stewart played wide that day, or was it Lestow? Actually, it must have been Graham. That was Graham, I think, because we would have had Jury and Dixon up front. So you actually looked at the calibre of players. The senior players, it was a bit hit and miss, and which sometimes happens. You think that was a really strong team in terms of players, and it hadn't quite gone.
Hall, Graham Lestow did start. Ken Monkow, Stewart, Townsend, Wise, yourself, Dixon, and Jury.
Yeah, so Graham must have played left back that day then, because obviously Tony DeVigo might have been injured. So the players were immense. I mean, I again looking back, someone like Tony DeVigo was brilliant when he came to the football club. Andy Townsend, we all know how good Andy was. Wisey was, a really good player, brilliant character, and obviously showed in terms of his longevity and how the level he went to over the years that he was class. So Gordon Jury, I know a lot of Spurs, Chelsea fans won't be happy with what I say, but he was brilliant for us as young players because he was a brilliant player, Gordon, a really good player, great character for youngsters as well. Kerry was coming towards the end of his career. He had a few injuries, but Kerry was still, a great player, great character. But it just hadn't happened, had it, in terms of a team of senior players. And Bobby's decided to play a few young bloods, as we called ourselves, and that, I think Sidney Youngblood might have been that singer around at the time. So we sort of we always had that belief and faith that us youngsters could compete. But the only reason we had that belief was because them senior players did really nurture us and try to help us have that belief as well. So that's I felt that was a real good point of Chelsea, and it's still strong to this day that all good senior players will definitely help the youngsters. And it was great times.
Was there anybody in particular that perhaps went the other way? So, say a senior pro that would see all these kids come through, would they be a little bit worried about losing their spot, so to speak? Were there sort of anybody that would perhaps give the young players a bit too much of a hard time to try and, more like tough love, basically? Yeah. Was there anybody like that, or?
No, definitely. I mean, I won't share the name of it, but I remember going to a do one year, and a wife of a player said to me, thanks for taking my husband's position. And it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek in that, but I think that just shows you how competitive the environment was, and we recognise that as well. I mean, because unfortunately, that is the nature of the sport. It's the nature of any nature of football. It's the nature of any sport, that you have to be ultra competitive and you want to be successful in that. But yeah, of course there was animosity, and being blunt, Keith, players didn't get on with players, in terms of you just wouldn't like certain players and that, but you'd always have that respect. And I think that's a real crucial word. And even now, as I develop young players, you say, you deal with different characters. You sometimes don't warm to each other's teammates. You've always got to have that common goal of who you're trying to play for and who you're trying to develop. So I won't throw anyone to the wolves and that, because like I say, when I look back, I don't have any animosity towards any player, So it's like so I think that's a good sign as well,
You was in and out of the squad this particular season, despite being a young player with other young players around you at the time. Was there an element of frustration, and did you speak to Bobby Campbell about, sort of the lack of first team football that you was having at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's something my dad will always sometimes he'll look at it and think, you should have maybe done this and that. But I always just use an example. We wasn't, as much as all these times were fantastic, Keith, we wasn't educated enough, I feel, on the side of the game, like on your physicality, for example. We were fit, we were professional, but you didn't have the support that you have now. The sports science, even psychologists, everything and that. So yeah, I was when I look back at my own self, there was a bit of a disappointment that you didn't play, but also there's a little bit of lack of knowledge, if that makes sense. That whereas nowadays young players are really well educated from all the way through. But I say where from 15, 16, you really understand. Well, look, if you don't play, just focus on your game, focus on what you can do well, and you'll get another chance, and you always will. Where probably in our day, we were a little bit sort of moody, a little bit sort of kept the focus, but probably didn't train probably as sharp or as well as we could have done. So you learn from that. And I made sure that in other times in my career, when you had them moments, that you had at Chelsea, because I'll be blunt, you were gutted that there were times you didn't play, and because it meant so much to you. So, but you learn, you're young, you're still trying to learn. Some get it young. I got it a little bit later. So there's definitely that regret and disappointment. But again, you always say you did what you wanted to do, which is play for your team, if that makes sense.
Just want to fast forward a little bit to the summer of '91. Bobby Campbell left. Ian Porterfield took over the role. At the time, what were your thoughts on the change, and what did you think of Ian Porterfield as the coach?
Yeah, I mean, great question that, because again, he was another one that when he became manager, maybe that relationship with the players changed a little bit. Not for us, because he was another real believer in us as young players and that. And obviously he was Bobby Campbell's number two. He came in, and as much as Bobby was a brilliant manager and a good coach, Ian was a fantastic coach, and he was really, really positive around us young players. I remember us we went on a fantastic trip to Canada. We went to Whistler. We was in Vancouver, and we went to Whistler. We played an end of season game. I mean, again, fantastic, the opportunities we get in football. And he said to me while he was on the trip, he said, next year will be your year, Damian. And I mean, and that was great for me. That was like great management. He might have known that he was going to get the manager's job. I think it wasn't it? It was already known that Bobby was going to go upstairs, wasn't he, in some capacity? And I think Ian was going to take over be the manager. And so for him to say that to me as a young player really did give you that boost and focus, and then everyone will be aware, which was a tragedy for me. But we then went on that pre-season trip, unfortunately, where there was a car accident, and it wasn't to be for me at that time under Ian. But then I had an injury as well. But yeah, he was I really liked Ian, and God rest his soul. He was a really good man, really good towards the young players, and I had a lot of respect for him.
Also in the summer of '91, Chelsea signed footballer who's now a Hollywood actor, Vinnie Jones. Do you have any stories of the great man? Do you remember sort of seeing him at training and playing alongside him?
Yeah. Vinnie was outstanding for Chelsea, as been known, because again, similar to what I said earlier, and now that I'm working at Millwall, and obviously first time that I've been working here, from the outside looking in, you'd always maybe sometimes have an impression of someone. Not until you get to know someone, and obviously got to know Vinnie very well. He was just class, Keith. He was he'd obviously come from Leeds. He'd had that great spell at both clubs, Wimbledon and Leeds, and he was everything that a proper good professional is. He was all about the team. He wanted to be a leader in terms of and Chelsea for me was arguably one of his biggest clubs, and he was just different class, Vinny. And yeah, we had many a laugh. We had many a good Christmas do with him, and one I particularly remember very well where we ended up just me, Vinny, and Jason Cundy, and we ended up in a bar in Fleet Street where I think he loved it because it was the famous picture of him grabbing Gaz's you know what, and he just chuckled as he looked at it, and we continued the night. But yeah, no, Vinny was different class. Great man, great character, great on the training pitch in terms of giving the lads a boost, giving them a bit of a G up if needed. So yeah, had great times with Vinny. And like I said earlier, Dennis Wise. And I mean, it was a time when Andy was, I think, looking to sort of Andy Townsend, unfortunately, was wanting to go higher. And I get it at the time, and that, in terms of whatever club he went to, Aston Villa, I know. But yeah, they were all good role models for us as youngsters because we were still young.
Now, your first appearance of the 91-92 season, you got sent off in a game against Tranmere in the League Cup, which we would go on to lose 3-1.
Yep.
Was this obviously a bad day in the office for you, but a bad day in the office for the team? Do you have any memories on this occasion of that game?
Yeah, no, I have three great memories. Obviously, the first one is we got beat, so that's never a good memory. And then when I did get sent off, again, it shows the quality of Vinny because he was the one that obviously you sort of went down the tunnel, and nowadays there's so many staff, you have someone walk with you and that, but it's a lonely place when you get sent off and that, because you normally you went off to the change room on your own, but Vinny came straight down into the change room, said you didn't really deserve that. Then we was watching it on the telly, and it was obviously when John Aldridge, Kevin Hitchcock knew that John Aldridge did the little shimmy, told the referee, look, make sure he doesn't do that shimmy before he actually takes the penalty. They allow it now. So I know everyone was going mental afterwards and that, but one of them games, one of them games you shouldn't lose, but you do. And yeah, it's frustrating on all levels. Frustrating to get sent off, but more importantly, frustrating that the team got beat.
And it was a long period from November to April of in that period where you wasn't playing. You did return to the side near the end of the season. Was there a point in your young career at this time that you thought about maybe leaving Chelsea to get first team football that you obviously needed?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you'll know better than me, Keith, just with the dates they know. I can't remember if that was the year where I had the broken bone in my foot. So whether it was which took just ages to get diagnosed, and when we did get it diagnosed, it still hadn't healed properly. So I can't remember if it was that season or the season before. But yeah, no, it was a long time. Yes, the frustration was probably more when I had been flying, in terms of obviously you get into the first team and you signed your first professional contract. Then me and Graham signed another one 1 year later. You were happy, you're doing well for the age and where you're at. And again, we were lucky enough to represent England under 21s. And when we went away, and as players do, you talk about your different salaries. Like we were, again, the Man United boys couldn't believe what salaries we were on, and that, So it wasn't as if we were treated unfairly at Chelsea. We were treated very fairly. When I did get back in as well, at some stage, I'd been offered an unbelievable contract as well, So I think it was a bit of, not so much I thought I'd arrived, but I actually thought I was probably on a level playing field with certain things. Where actually, in hindsight, I was still a very, very young man, Keith, and that, So, as I said earlier, the frustration I had, I wish that I'd actually used that a little bit more positively in terms of the training and certain things. But again, that's how you learn, and hopefully, I've been in youth development a long, long time. You always try to help young players in that capacity as well. That if you get offered a contract and you're happy, just sign it. Because if you're going to play well, you'll get rewarded. The club will reward you. It's not as if they don't. If you're playing well, the club wants to reward you. I haven't found that too often the club just wants to, unless they need the revenue. I've been at places like Charlton where we've had to, unfortunately, they had to sell players just to bring some revenue in, and you understand that as well. But the likes of Chelsea have always been quite stable, would be the word I use, even in our times of not having the big money that now we've had with Abramovich. But it's been pretty stable with players and that. And obviously, 9 times out of 10, players left in my time because they wanted to leave. You know, very rarely did Chelsea have to sell a player for astronomical amounts of money because they needed to do something. That probably come a little bit after my time.
Fast forward a little bit to the 92-93 season, the inaugural Premier League season, which is nearly 30 years ago. Chelsea began their campaign at home to Oldham, and you started the game. To start first game of the season, new season, new expectations on the club. Did this give you a bit of a confidence boost, knowing, obviously, as you said, what perhaps transpired beforehand, to then sort of get the start early doors? Was this a positive for you in your mindset going forward?
100%, because I think Ian Porterfield was the manager, wasn't he? Still, was Ian Porterfield the manager? Yeah. So I remember it clearly. So Ian Porterfield was the manager, and so that would have been, I think, Vancouver, and then that season starting. So maybe I did my foot this year, but to be given the number 8 is like, I'm still proud to this day, because you think of all the legends that have worn the shirt since. To actually be the first number 8 for Chelsea is something I'll be always very, very proud of. If that, and really thankful. So yes, I was delighted that you got given the opportunity. Trying to think where, because we played. It was me. Did Andy, Vinny, and myself play that day, or was it? Just trying to think what 3 played.
I'm having a look now. Because Paul Elliott played, Robert Fleck started, Mick Harford was there, and I believe he did score.
Yeah.
Graham Stewart and Andy Townsend.
Yes. So I think and was Vinny in that team as well? Was Vinny in
Jones
midfield?
In the team, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it just shows you, like nowadays we all played 4-4-2 in them days, and like if it had been nowadays, it would have been like a 4-3-3, and I'd probably still be playing with Chelsea even at about 51. But it's like it's funny because we were bog standard 4-4-2, and I do believe, trying to think, because I definitely didn't play on the left, I was more in the centre. So it must have been Andy was maybe forced a little bit out left, which he wouldn't have been too happy about, and Vinny in the middle as well. But you felt you had the opportunity, and then I remember the Norwich game as well. We didn't, again, being blunt, it didn't go so well. I think we got beat. They had a decent team, to their credit, and then that was my opportunity, like, stopped as such. But I think maybe and no fault, just the sort of way we played as well, and that, But again, you blame, not, you don't blame yourself, but you're disappointed that you didn't perform to the best of your ability. But that's life, it's football.
Well, I'm glad you sort of mentioned the Norwich game, because after that, later that year, you then went out on loan to Luton Town.
Yep.
Can you share some of the sort of details in regards to this move? Was it the club's decision, or was it your decision to decide?
I remember it well. Yeah, because we had Don Howe, didn't we? Another great man, great coach, Don. And I'm getting to that stage now because, as you say, season 19, is this 92-93? Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm turning 22. Obviously, I was September born, so I'm 22. And in Chelsea defence, and then even in my defence, I want to play. Like all kids that get to that age, at that stage, you're still calling you a kid, but you're a young man, and you want to play. And I was quite forthright, being blunt, because you'd obviously had played previously, you'd been around the scene for a good few years. I would have naturally spoke to Ian. I would have spoke to Dom. When not necessarily looking back, but the advice they gave me at the time was spot on, and that, in terms of, as most managers and coaches would say, look, get your head down. If an opportunity arises, then you'll get a chance. But also, if someone comes in for you on loan, and because I hadn't had the chance, when David Plea spoke to me and gave me the opportunity, you were thinking, and I think in that month I ended up playing about 6 games for him, I think, or even more. I think I was there 2 months. But what was funny was I enjoyed it there. I absolutely loved it there. I mean, he was brilliant. David Plea, Chris Kamara was there. He was excellent for me. He was a senior pro, similar to what we said about Vinny. He played with Vinny actually at Leeds, but he was just a brilliant man, a brilliant pro. Sort of took you under his wing a little bit in terms of like playing in midfield with him. There was another Ricky Hill was training there. They had some really good players. They had some really good senior players as well. Some good youngsters coming through. Paul Telfer, some really good senior players. John Hartson was my apprentice, and that was cleaned my boots. I remember it really well. So it's a really good football club. But then I had a vibe. I just got this vibe that potentially they were gonna. I don't know how I heard about it, but I heard that Chelsea might look to sell me to Luton, and Alex Chamberlain, who comes to Chelsea and was a great guy, could go the other way. And that actually really cheats me off on that, because I'm thinking I hadn't heard any of it, and I actually don't want to leave Chelsea. I still want to be part, hopefully, of the future. They're my team. So I actually came back. So after the loan period, I personally cut short myself because I was, like I said, I've always been a bit not stubborn but strong, and I think we were brought up that way, Keith. And at times probably not right, but I ended up coming back to Chelsea, and I still didn't feature in that, So I think there was a little bit of not animosity, but it was just one of them things,
And it wasn't until, as you mentioned, it was a long time when you did cut short your loan move. It wasn't sort of straight away that you was back into the fold of being selected for Chelsea. It wasn't until 93 you returned eventually to the starting 11 against Arsenal. Did Ian at the time sort of spend time with you to discuss his plans for you going forward, or was this just a case of just turning up at training and hoping you would be picked?
Yeah, I mean, it was slowly the days of agents becoming more involved in football, and it was going that way where not so much because you end up getting, if I'm being blunt, you end up getting cheesed off, going to see the manager once a week or once every couple of weeks and saying, look, will I get a chance? And them saying, well, train well, get your head down. Of course you'll get a chance on that. And they were always fine. And Ian, like I said, I had the utmost respect for Ian and Don. I think Don Don left at some stage then. I don't know if he's still with us and that, in terms of coaching. Obviously we had, Eddie Neveski, as I mentioned earlier. He'd been a real strong ally of us young players and that, because he'd been our youth team coach. He was now reserve team coach, so he would always help us. Said he was different class. As I mentioned, Gwyn would always give us stern but sort of good advice. So I felt the advice we were getting was spot on. You do, being blunt and being totally honest, you do get demoralised. You do get disappointed. You do get frustrated because all you want to do is play in the first team. But we're also realist as well, knowing that if you have a squad of, even in them days, say there was 20, 24 pros, only 11 can play. And then I forget how many subs it was in them days. I remember it was still 3, probably was only 3 subs. But so there was limited opportunity. That's probably what's better nowadays, Keith, is that you can have 7 subs. So it relays, it sort of eases the disappointment, because you're gutted you're not playing, but still to be one of the subs, at least you feel part of it, So whereas we could train all week, not get on the bench, and it's gutting when you want to play for your team,
And especially in your role now as working in the youth development side, if you are a young player and you've been working hard all week at training and that pathway is slowly getting there, even to be on the bench, whether it's a League Cup tie, FA Cup, or a crucial leagues team, that must sort of give a young player the massive confidence. And even someone like yourself who has been there and done it into a sense, to have 5, 6, or even 7 subs, that it does help the young talent, doesn't it?
100%, because again, the opportunity's there for you and that. I mean, you might be winning handsomely, and the manager can take the gamble, put you on. You might be struggling, and even though he might have wanted to put a striker on, he's not selected, and you end up putting a winger. You might be a winger, but you end up playing up front. Like Graham Stewart, Graham Stewart, all for our sort of youth team days, was a wide player, but ended up doing a great job for Chelsea, playing as a forward where he could play. So, and again, he did play that, whether it's the youth or the reserves, but was predominantly a wide player in that, but did well for Chelsea as a wide player or centre forward. So, definitely them more subs help players, I think, especially younger players, not only just develop, but also keep that focus as well, because obviously the salaries are now astronomical and they need to be involved for me, because if you're just training, picking up that type of salary, you lose that motivation, and the motivation is everything.
Now, in February of '94, you left Chelsea to join Crystal Palace. What was the reasonings, factors behind this move, and do you have any stories on this particular occasion?
Yeah, I mean, that's clear, actually, because as we said, I mean, to be fair to Glenn Hoddle, he was very good when he came in. And it's ironic, to be fair, because as we were developing, you'd look at it, there was, say, me, Eddie Newton and Craig Burley. And obviously being the older one, at one stage, you were considered the one that would be closer to the first team. And then it was funny because I think Craig was going to get sold to Coventry. They couldn't agree the deal under Hoddle. Eddie had a good loan move, I think, to Cardiff. And Hoddle had actually offered me a contract. They'd offered me like a 3-year deal when Hoddle joined. And it was, again, me being a bit stubborn because the actual salary level was lower than what they'd offered me a couple of years before. The whole package was more, but me being a bit stubborn and thinking I was entitled to a certain amount, wasn't cheesed off with Glenn, far from it, because I really liked Glenn. He was a really good coach. I think it was early in his career, so his man management got better, and he was like really good in that, but he did offer me a contract, and I think he liked my style of, like, my type of play was obviously a footballer, creator, a passer. So he did generally like my style of play, but because I hadn't signed the contract, I just stayed on a week to week, as you could do then, and wasn't getting opportunities. I just felt now was probably the right time in that. I was like 20, I would have been 23 years old, and it was the right time to go. And being blunt, I was going to a club that straight away was saying, look, you're going to play. And that was that was a godsend for me, because, I mean, to his credit, Alan Smith, I literally did. I signed and played every game that I was fit to play, and ended up sneaking a championship medal up and promotion to the Premier League. So, I was very lucky, because it wasn't, apart from scoring an average goal at Notts Forest, it was down to all them other good players that were there at the time,
Now, discussed your career and obviously mentioned your time with Chelsea. Was there any particular people that were, if you remember, were a bit sad to see you go? Did you have any sort of last words, as you say, with Glenn or with your sort of former teammates when you did move?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, to be fair, because you're pleased in one way, and I don't mean that negative towards Chelsea, because hopefully my passion for Chelsea is still to this day. And I was at the game last week against Tottenham at White Hart Lane, so sitting with a friend of mine who works at Tottenham, so it was great being a Chelsea fan, sitting there amongst all the Tottenham fans, and he said to me I did well when Rudiger scored, just to keep my composure. But of course, you're on a professional level, I was pleased that I was going, Keith, in terms of the opportunity to come and play. But on a personal, and then obviously from a professional, of how much love and respect I've got for Chelsea, of course you were disappointed. And I'll be totally honest with you, it took a good many years. I went to Burnley, and even to this day now, people probably get tired of me talking about my time at Chelsea or opportunities. So hopefully people can tell how fond I am of all my time at Chelsea, whether you played or didn't play. Again, now you're older, wiser, you've learned from it and respect everything that happened. And your mixed emotions would probably be the right word, but pleased to go and play. And it was a great club, Palace, with good people, some really good players. and disappointed that maybe I hadn't played enough games at Chelsea. Would probably be my only regret. I think someone gave me saying, "Well, it was great." They gave me. We used to have a fantastic guy. Used to follow the youth team, reserves, and the first team. Ron, I forget his surname, bless him. But so he gave me something once, and I think I ended up playing about 150 reserve games, which is crazy because I looked at them and thought maybe a 50 of them should have been first team games as well. But that's life. That's life. You had a great time. And being blunt, you've been totally honoured to represent Chelsea.
Now I want to talk to you, Damian, about the current events, what's going on in the world of football. And I asked this question to all my previous guests last year and even sort of the back end of 2020 when we started. And it's been a bit of a popular topic, a bit of a hot topic to some, and other people still don't like it in the game. But I want to get your thoughts on VAR. Are you for it?
Yep.
Do you feel that it still needs to be tweaked? Are you a fan of it?
Yeah, I mean, we've had goal line technology, so I think anything that helps make a quick decision on goals, whether that's from a penalty decision, strains the corners and like set piece scenario really drives me mad, really, because I actually think referees don't need VAR so much for that, even though I know if there's a penalty decision, they can look at it. Because I think a really good referee sorts that out very straight away. So he actually then saves having to go to VAR, if that makes sense now. So I'm okay with it. I think it's crazy, the offside rule, because everyone talks about it every week of how they haven't been making that decision quick enough. And we have been very fortunate that we haven't seen any serious injuries yet, and touch wood, we never do. But I would say I'm all for any progress in football that makes the decision clearer. Obviously, the argument would come, VAR, all it's done is confuse some of the decisions, and I wouldn't argue against that. So I just think, I've heard different scenarios being suggested, and I love the scenario that the referees and officials who are working on obviously on the pitch basically have more influence with the people who are working off the pitch, because they should be real ultra professionals as well. And if you're working with a team of people that you work with maybe over a certain amount of games, then that relationship is going to become stronger. So I'm for it, but only for the progress. I don't like the delays. I think the delays are too long at times.
Now I want to touch on, as you've sort of mentioned, the game against Tottenham in the League Cup, which I went to as well. It was a great day out, to be fair. It was nice to see all the Spurs fans with glum faces. But I want to get your thoughts on the current Chelsea, current European champions. League-wise, not doing too great at this moment in time, but we're still in the FA Cup. We're in the League Cup final as well. What's been your thoughts looking sort of on the outside of Chelsea? Have you been impressed with them? Has there been any sort of players that have stood out for you this season?
Yeah, I think they've been magnificent, Keith, and as you say, to be the Champions League winners, and then I felt we started the season okay, and then I had a brilliant spell, and then I think I had a statement the other day, and I unfortunately didn't watch the Brighton game, but when they said that Brighton had only played 9 games and we had played 15, I think it was, and just them extra 6 games, and I'm not defending players, far from it, but just them extra 6 games in that space of time just shows you. So when Tuchel, sometimes managers make the quote that players might be tired physically or mentally, and obviously being a former professional, you understand exactly what he's trying to say there. He's not saying they can't perform, far from it, because I think sometimes with COVID, it means that teams haven't played and maybe they could have done. But I just think Chelsea have actually been, whether it's mental or physically fatigued, I'm not privy to that information. And also you then factor in players like Lukaku, who has obviously been fantastic at the beginning of the season. Then he gets his injury. The type of player he is, it seems that he always needs to need a run of games to get in the groove again. You then look at the likes of Mason Mount as well, obviously been involved in the Euros, been outstanding at certain times. Kanté, who we know, just unbelievable, just fantastic, but had a few niggles and that. So you look at all them factors, they do make a difference, because if you don't have your best 11 out there, and I'm not saying Chelsea can have a best 18 with the calibre of players we have, you then also got one or two young ones who are still finding their sort of their pathway. So yeah, it's been difficult. It has been difficult for Chelsea, and I'm not defending them. And credit where credit's due. Man City are top draw, aren't they? You know.
And lastly, Damian, and thanks very much for coming on to the show today. How do you look back on your time at Chelsea?
Well, as I said, I mean, I claim to be really a Chelsea fan from the age of 14. I'm now 51, so that's 37 good years. I just look on it really fondly, Keith, is that you was that kid with a dream, and you obviously don't know who you're going to play for. So I was honoured to play for Chelsea, and obviously to say that from the age of 14, where in my day it did start to matter of how seriously you took the football, to actually represent Chelsea all the way through schoolboy, youth team, reserves, and then first team. Also to represent your country, England under 21s, while being a Chelsea player. I look back on my time as a beautiful time, and that's why I'm still so fond of the Blues now. And I worked there as well when I went back in 2000 to 2006 in the academy. That was a real pleasure as well, you know. So yeah, I feel very proud that I've represented them in both as a player and as a coach. And yeah, I look back on my time really fondly with great memories. And also, more important for me, I always used to talk about this, as much as it's great being a footballer, it was also great the people I was around as well, because I had some great people that you basically grew up with and then played football with. So even better.
Well, Damian, I think this interview could not have been any better. So again, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with your role at Millwall, and hopefully we'll see you down at the bridge quite soon.
I hope so, Keith. All the best.